Hey guys, welcome back to FTD. Here today we have another early game, early-ish game unit, hovertank, the Razorwind Waltz. So let's jump straight into combat testing and see what it can do. So this is my only unit. Um, that's kind of a hovertank type unit for the Quest for Meter campaign. Because it only has one gun, it uses the one primary weapon for a variety of different purposes, just similar to the Dancing Starlight's escort destroyer. The role of this craft isn't necessarily meant to work on its own, but rather, early game to be the main part of a fleet formation supported by some glass cannon fighter bombers, and then in later game, it functions more of a fleet defensive unit, and it attempts to flank the enemy as well as deal with swarms. So what you see here is that under very favorable conditions for the gun, it will attempt to intercept the incoming munitions, and then when a small enemy is within a certain range of the main craft, it will engage in anti-air mode and try to shoot them down, but otherwise it will target the largest threat, the main target. To ease the function of the gun for such a variety of purposes, it has a very rapid fire. It's basically a low caliber rapid fire gun to be able to achieve all these different functions. The munition itself is AP heat kinetic projectile with around 80 to 90% of the firepower in kinetic and 20 to 10% of the damage in heat. So basically, it will be able to pierce, delete a lot of this armor. Can delete about 2 alloy beams or metal beams with a single strike. And then if it hits heavy armor, as either a primary or a secondary armor layer, then the heat will be able to sneak through and try to fish for some small amount of internal damage. And if that hits an ammunition magazine, which on a small craft of similar cost, it's quite easy to do so, then it will detonate the magazine. As you can see, it's quite reliable damage has taken out some of these weapons. It's not a massive amount of damage, but this is what happens when you design a general purpose vehicle like so. So, very much specializing in the role of jack of all trades, ironically. And let's see another enemy that could be quite popular in the early game. For example, the Thunderbird by Lightning Foots. Because it's a very fast vehicle and has a decent amount of firepower, you're likely to see something like the Thunderbird quite often. Because the Thunderbird is considered a godly level craft, you'll see it quite often in harder difficulty campaigns. But as you can see, because it only has one layer of armor, the systems can be taken out quite easily. The rate of fire is quite low now because the tank uses modified autoloaders just to keep the profile as small as possible, and everything is optimized for compactness on this craft. So really we want to reload the magazine before each fight, or rather between fights. But I think you can see what I meant before, talking about the AP heat ammunition is quite effective at deleting blocks, but when there's no heavy armor, but when there's only a thin layer of heavy armor here, you can't just bypass the protection of that heavy armor and the heat will be able to go through and do some small amount of internal damage, but again, for opponents of this size, that's quite enough. Okay, let's see how we do against a Hake squadron. Even though these little fighters are way below the cost of our tank, but because they're quite common in the early game, we do want to see kind of we do kind of expect this type of matchup quite often. Just having one defender going, kind of holding down one area of the map against a large number of continuous assaults by just these small pesky enemies. Because the gun fires at a very high velocity, it does decent against these small targets as well. When the computer identifies that the primary target is of a low volume, it will try to closing the distance to a different engagement mode to just improve the accuracy. So here we can see why the craft is called the Razorwind Waltz. The craft has a very flat profile, it skims very quickly across the surface of the water, or just over the surface of the water. But also it dances around quite a bit. As you can see, there's actually 5 different behavior modes, which allows it to switch between either side facing the enemy or front facing the enemy. So basically the armor on the front and 2 side arcs are quite similar. So basically the armor on the front and 2 sides of the craft are quite similar, and by having different arcs, it allows the target damage to be distributed all around the side of the ship. This is not quite evident against a missile or a cram craft, because the missiles are not really expected to hit, but when we're facing enemies using railguns just like ourselves, then we do kind of want to use armor on all the sides and distribute the damage. The ammunition mix do include super cavitation rounds, so we are able to do some below the waterline damage as well. Okay, so we take out all these missile launchers, and we have not taken any damage. So I think we can call this fight again, Iron Cordon, because it's a large missile spanner, it's kind of an interesting benchmark for the early game. You can see there's a bit of an internal space, very minimal, but just to have it with the flavor of having crew comfort and having this being a real vehicle that can be operated, even though there's a high degree of operation. In true tank fashion, the hatch is not accessible if the turret is over on top of it, but we can't jump out. Alright, we can have a look at what's going on here. So you can see that's the main gun. It's all about fat autoloaders, so yeah, it will be more effective at the beginning of combat, and it's advantageous to the vehicle to try to end the combat as early as possible and reload the magazine between fights. There's some steam stuff going on near the cockpit, just to charge the railguns. And then all the laser components are front and rear of the vehicle, just to provide as an extra bit of buffer, since it's the least important component. You see this kind of design choice on a lot of the campaign crafts as well, just using laser defense components as a filler between layers to prevent heat damage or hedge damage from getting through. There's two target prioritization cards, which triggers based on proximity. There's a lot of ACBs for all kinds of different things, including getting suspecting on the main lifts. This allows the craft to turn just slightly faster than it otherwise would, but it's basically free turning ability that's not really used for anything else if we don't make use of it. So why not? You got warp coils again to dodge missiles. This one only activates if the tank is facing sideways to the target and the missile is closing in. So now you can see the armor scheme. It's basically 2 layers of alloy as ablative armor, and then we got 1/2 layer of heavy armor, whereas the half layer is a 4-meter beam slope, which is best for kind of slightly mitigating kinetic damage from the side, but also functions as a gap against heat and hedge ammunition. Ironically, this type of armor layering is vulnerable against the AP heat ammunition that we fire ourselves, but it's an ammunition type that's quite uncommon in the campaign. So there isn't really a lot of other options that are better. Can have 1 layer of heavy armor outside and then the half layer of heavy armor inside. But then we lose the heavy armor to heavy armor stacking, where this is slightly better against pure kinetic penetrators, which is slightly more common and a little bit scarier, so I decided to go with this type of layout. The turret itself also has heavy armor, at least on the front half of the turret. Turret piece itself. You can see the heavy armor is about half a layer. Okay, there you have it, the Razorwind Waltz. So thanks everyone for watching. See you guys next time.